Linux as an operating system for everyday use is a topic I've been interested in for a very long time. Especially since last year when I started using alternatively both Windows and Linux on one computer and switching between those systems in a minute if I needed something else. I did a video on another channel about the same topic, but this time I think I will do it a bit longer and include a bit more information. A lot of the videos I've been making lately, whether for Dokkan or Honkai, were first recorded on that system and then edited on Windows. But why am I even making a video that deviates from my usual ones? Maybe it's something to fill a hole, maybe it's something I wanted to make a film about and see how it would be received to make some similar films later. Something like that. My main idea was simply to push back on Windows 11 and show an alternative. After all, I as well as a large number of people want to use computer as, well, a computer and not a fucking service where ads and subscriptions are pushed at every turn, while Windows 10 will stop receiving support next year, and nothing is known about 12. Is it going to be even worse system or maybe even better? Maybe it was cancelled and we will be staying with Windows 11 for quite a few years, I'm not sure. In today's video I would like to present what Linux is, my adventure with it, to show how hard it was to use, how it, well, worked, what I liked, disliked, and the final evaluation. So yeah, enjoy the video. All the recorded clips you will see were made on Linux and at some point they will be touched upon. So from the beginning, what is Linux, or more precisely GNU Linux, so that no one eats me for bad pronunciation. Linux itself is a kernel made available as open source. It was written by Linus Torvalds in 1991 and developed to this day, adding support for devices, security or stability, and many more. GNU on the other hand is a system consisting of exclusively open source programs. Combining the Linux kernel with GNU compilers or libraries, we get GNU/Linux. Although let's agree, it's simple to say you're using Linux then GNU plus something. Linux can most often be found in server environments because of its support, stability or non-stop operation. Linux itself, although in very modified form, is also found as a base for systems of other machines like phones, routers or TVs and much more. Well, just how does such Linux perform on home computers? Not well. The StatCounter website shows that the digital share of Linux as of September is 4.55% with 71.47% of Windows. This is incredibly low, and with 50.45% of Apple OS X, we apparently have a rather grim picture of what it looks like. Of course, those are dry statistics and you can talk about how many samples during that month were taken, but nevertheless, looking at how many people use Windows, how many find it at work, home, school, those 4.5% becomes a really large number of people who use it as a system. Well, before we go further, it is also worth looking at what we have to choose from. If there is such a person who says he wants to install Linux, it is worth breaking down this statement. Which Linux? Because there are lots of distributions, or in this case, let's say these are systems. And while some of them may be familiar to you, like Ubuntu, Arch or Mint, it's worth mentioning a few of the most popular ones and discuss their characteristics in a very simple way. The order will be arbitrary, although I will probably mention the older and easier ones first, and the more difficult ones last. Debian is the second longest lived distribution after Slackware. It is characterized by stability and a quality of system and easy to update, so official versions of Debian are released relatively infrequently. It is also where apt, so package managed system, for installing, updating and removing packages first appeared. Ubuntu is a Debian derivative created by Canonical. Ubuntu versions are releasing every 6 months in April and October, although they have also an LTS version, which is long-term support, which simply means they offer longer support for this type of distribution, usually lasting for 2 years or more. Ubuntu is trying to define its desktop experience by using apps on the Flutter ecosystem and moving away from app to snap packages and their snap store, but the latter is currently facing criticism due to instability, numerous bugs, and in case of snap store, malware that can steal our data if we download a suspicious package. Ubuntu exists in many versions for many environments, the more important ones I will mention later. Linux Mint is a distribution based on both Ubuntu and Debian with Linux Mint Debian Edition. It is aimed at novice users and will probably be everyone's first choice to get used to working on a Linux computer. Mint's developers are cutting themselves off from the Ubuntu's ideology of being the first to promote free software. Despite the long support of larger versions, Mint allows the user to install newer versions of Linux kernel easily to receive support for the new hardware. Fedora Linux is a derivative of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which was aimed at, of course, enterprises. Fedora relies on the use of RPM package format and is aimed at the desktop users while maintaining the idea of free software. One of Fedora's modifications, for example, is Nobara Linux, created by Glorious Eggroll, streamlines Fedora and adds needed packages for beginners along with friendly first-time guide. In addition to Mint, I would recommend the official version of Nobara as well. Arch Linux is a distribution based on rolling release policy, focusing on providing the latest stable versions of applications and packages. Arch Linux is generally very minimal once installed, and its installation is also incredibly minimal, as it has no graphical interface or installer for that matter. Although there is Arch install, but I've heard few bad things about it, so I'm not sure if it's good or not. Pacman, as their package manager, was specifically created for this distribution and its derivatives. Despite the high skill threshold to install Arch, it has one of the largest and most dedicated communities and dedicated and detailed documentation created by the community named ArchWiki. Personally, I don't recommend Arch to anyone as a first choice. Exceptionally, you can do it if you are a masochist, but for a first choice I don't recommend it because you can get discouraged right away. Instead of Arch, for the beginning I would recommend distributions that are based on it, such as EndeavourOS or Manjaro. Endeavour simply gives you a slightly modified Arch, and Manjaro adds a Pacman frontend PAMAC. Despite few stumbles of Manjaro like DDoSing AUR or forgetting to renew the certificates for the website, it is still one of my choices that I would recommend if you are wanting to use Arch. It is also worth mentioning environments, in other words, how our desktop will look like, the programs attached to it, the idea and how it will work. Window managers won't be here because no, and heck, I don't even consider them a good point for beginners. The best ones are, like I say, desktop environments that are basically some of them resembling what you are used to. GNOME is one of the default environments of distributions such as Ubuntu, Fedora, and Debian, and is created by many developers and companies funding the project. GNOME is based on a toolkit called GTK, which is used for many applications. Iterations of the desktop have evolved over the years to eventually be something like macOS with a top bar and a dock, but with so many changes that we can really compare them with each other. From GNOME 3.0 and on, developers have opted for a more modern style that has been met with wave of criticism and a split in the community into smaller creating environments like Mate, Cinnamon, and Unity. The style was pioneered through the creation of GNOME Shell and focused on the minimalism and switching between tasks in a separate part called Overview. GNOME has its own suite of applications like the Nautilus File Explorer, GNOME Photos, Videos for viewing photos and videos of course, Disk Management, a software center from which we can download applications, a clock, maps, weather, a screenshot tool, and many more. In addition to it, extensions created by the community add more enhancements, widgets, everything to improve the quality of the system and use. KDE Plasma is the most popular desktop environment after GNOME, using the Qt toolkit and KDE frameworks, and in addition to the environment, it also provides a large suite of applications necessary for working. Plasma is more accessible to people switching from Windows due to its layout resembling that of Microsoft systems, but what distinguishes the two environments is the possibility and amount of changes you can do that can be made to the Plasma environment. Each element works independently, such as desktop, widgets, taskbar, toolbar, everything. Cinnamon is the environment previously mentioned, with GNOME being the main desktop environment of Linux Mint. The base was GNOME 3.0, but the developers are taking the path of more traditional version of the desktop, created completely separate applets, extensions, and other components incompatible with GNOME Shell. Cinnamon focuses on simplicity as well as user-friendliness, hence it is called a Linux learning environment. Starting with the things I liked, it can be mentioned right away that I was able to get used to the interface quite easily, due to the fact I used both KDE somehow at the beginning of the year, and now GNOME, I knew where the settings were, what to click and where to download programs from, using such applications like Discover or software in GNOME's case. It is also worth mentioning the simplicity of installation of such Linux, for example Ubuntu or specific other distributions. To install the system, we have at the beginning live USB environment, which will give us a foretaste of what awaits us. You can play with the interface and in general see if the system suits you. In the event of a reboot, all changes in this environment will be reset. Installers such as Calamares or the one in Ubuntu done in the style of Flutter offer very fast, clear and readable installation. In some cases even you'll be also able to install Linux alongside Windows Boot Manager if there's an option. I will briefly describe how both working applications and computer games performed, as these are in my opinion the two most important aspects discussed quite often in Linux, probably accounting for most of the average user time. By the point with games, it is also worth mentioning the Steam Deck, which is a key device in this regard. It is a gaming handheld released by Valve. Due to its size, components and availability, we can talk here about a smart portable computer with Penguin on board. The system that is found there is SteamOS based on Arch, and its main purpose is of course playing games from Steam application, hence the native launch of the deck in special mode, accessible to consoles, although outside games we can perform the same activities as on computer. The only thing that limits us is the components of the device. In my opinion, Steam Deck is a really good example in terms of computer games. Linux performance will depend primarily on our hardware, however performance compared to Windows is at a very similar level. Often it is a difference of 2 to 5 frames per second in favor of one side or the other, and this will vary from title to title. Let's say one title will have 17 frames difference in the favor of Linux. Let's say another will have 20 frames in favor of Windows, and maybe in other game this one won't be playable on Linux, for example. While many games are able to run and can be played as on Windows, this does not mean that all games will work. If you want to find out if a game on Steam works, you can visit protondb.com, where each title in the library has a corresponding label. It works natively, it works well although it has problems, or it doesn't work at all. For each comment left by a user, we can also see their specifications of what they use. If the game is not on Steam but on Epic Games Store, EA app or Xbox app, there are plenty of forums when you can ask, such as Reddit and It's Linux Gaming, or also use an unofficial game launcher such as Lotris. More interestingly, while testing racing games, I happened to connect a steering wheel using the program that is used to control the device, called Oversteer, and an additional package dedicated for the Thrustmaster devices. It worked perfectly, and just as say in previous attempts, the steering wheel was not responsive. Now I could freely configure its settings and behavior. In the recordings, as you can see, the games may not be very resourceful, but the key thing is that both Honkai and Genshin are not officially supported, but after using a launcher project that translates commands from Windows to Linux via Wine, it is possible to play these two games stably. What is also worth mentioning is, for example, like you see in the case of Witcher 3, I tried to play it on the highest settings, I think it was Ray Tracing Ultra, and it worked. You could see it fluctuated between 40, 50, even 60 frames, but of course for me it wasn't performing as I was expecting, so I just toned it down to the Uber settings, and it stayed like this, and it almost capped at, I think, 144 frames. What is also more interesting is that there was an issue with the cutscenes and my ultrawide monitor. Basically, what happened is, as you can see, on ultrawide monitors you have the issue with some games that they don't support ultrawide resolution, and you have black bars on both sides. In my case, those black bars were on only one side, obstructing the view, and also a bit distracted me during those cutscenes. What's more important, I don't know if it is possible to fix with also well-known fix that is available. I haven't tried it because I was recording it that one day, but I thought that it didn't matter much, because in gameplay, as you can see, the ultrawide resolution, whether I was fighting, walking, using horse, everything worked, and I didn't bother much with playing like 20 minutes and done. Otherwise I would probably use the fix, but I thought it was worth mentioning that stuff like this can happen. I mentioned games, but what about everyday stuff? Those work well. I chose my favorite software from the Discover of Flatpak. For example, OBS, Discord, Steam extensions. These are things that come to my mind first. One interesting thing I noticed that was coincidental is printing. Yes, printing was very important to me. One time I needed to print some labels to send, and when I tried to do it on Windows, I encountered some problems. I'm not sure what caused it, but I lost a lot of time with drivers, reconnecting, rebooting, while Linux recognized the printer and I could finally print the very important things, like instantly. As for peripherals, they work out of the box, although it should be remembered that many hardware will not have their company support, by which is meant that we do not get special software from the manufacturer for say mice, keyboards, headsets. These are supported only out of the box. While any modern hardware can work with any calibration software, provided that the community has written or ported drivers for it. For headsets, we have an equalizer. Using Pipewire, we have access to EasyFX application. For Pulse Audio, there is a related application as well. This allows us to control the effects for audio headsets, add filters to the microphone, play around with the equalizer at the headphones or your speakers, add more and more effects to get the sound we want. For mice, we can configure our own model, although here I will mention right away that some models have limited use. For example, my old Corsa mice didn't have support for the side buttons, and now that I have Razer mouse, it's miraculously working. It is worth mentioning that hardware from Logitech will work out of the box and is supported due to, I think, drivers being in kernel. And I think the same can be applied for the Razer stuff, but I'm not sure about that one. For RGB, there's OpenRGB where you can control your flashy lights. And if you are interested in AI, there are several tools to use locally. Want to use Stable Diffusion? There is Linux version that works well with CUDA technology for NVIDIA, although I'm not so sure about ROCm technology support for AMD. Theoretically, you can use it on Linux, but during my attempts I got some errors after installing the packages and didn't try it again. At least I won't until the STM version comes out with natively supporting ROCm. I hope so. Cobalt, which is the local frontend and backend for LLMs, which are large language models, is easy to set up and run. These are the things I've tried to do on my daily basis and wanted to see if they will work on Linux. Now it is worth touching on some issues that are less pleasant. There are problems that I have encountered and also my thoughts on some things. Starting with the obvious, the first thing are games. There are still titles that do not allow you to run the game on Linux because of the anti-cheats or because they have problems and require some fixes in upcoming Proton patch. In these 2 years, many games have been fixed to a working state. For example, I don't remember being able to play Honkai Impact in 2022, and now it's possible thanks to the community and the things they are doing. The same thing is happening in the other direction. However, as cheat blocking programs become more and more invasive and cover more and more games, it may be harder to play some games. Until around the end of 2023, you could play, for example, League of Legends freely with a few patches, and now that LoL also uses Vanguard anti-cheat, it won't be possible. It's not only Riot Games titles that have such a dependency. Battlefield 5 also switched to another anti-cheat, preventing Linux players from playing it. And something worth mentioning, this game in the between that last year and this year had quite spike in player numbers. On Steam charts page you can even see that trend that started from November and December last year. So it's really sad that support for this game has also disappeared. Another game that is still on a list of unplayable games is Rainbow Six Siege, where the number of players at the beginning of the year has doubled, and now, although it's stable, it's still a lot of people, and we still haven't reached any solution. Easy Anti-Cheat, for example, allows the game to be played on Linux, and it's only up to the game developer whether or not to include the option that allows the game to be played on Linux. There are also two things, I think, that I want to mention right now, because during writing the script, editing this video, and even talking right now, there's been few things that popped up and I didn't include it here. So first thing is, of course, GTA 5. GTA 5, more specifically GTA Online, is now using different anti-cheat. Well, different anti-cheat. Let's say they had anti-cheat in the first place. They are using now, if I remember correctly, BattleEye, which should work on Linux. It is probably possible to work on Linux, but they didn't, of course, include that in their update. And people are going, oh, such a small loss, only Steam Deck and Linux players, so minority. No, it's not a minority. The game is having 100,000 players online every day. This is something that needs to be addressed. This almost over 10-year-old game is still having 100k players daily, monthly, every year. There is 100 players playing at this point. What is more important is that this trend that, well, is staying on, that people say, well, if you are using Linux you might probably be cheater because you are going to use modding software or cheating software on Linux to gain advantage, because anti-cheats don't work as well as on Linux probably. Granted, that might be fake, but still, there is a video of, if I remember correctly, on some Ordinary Gamers channel. You'll see it right now, what I am talking about, that you can see people on Linux Gaming showing how to play GTA Online while using workarounds. The one workaround that was shown there is a fucking mod menu, so this thing, it only justifies some of the decisions that those companies do, basically. Even if, you know, that was shown to show that, hey, you can still play on Linux this game. It still isn't a great example. Another thing that I wanted to touch upon is, well, basically the same what I mentioned, which is, of course, gaming. While some titles don't work, people are making workarounds, let's say for, again, Grand Theft Auto 5, for Rainbow Six Siege, for Battlefield. These workarounds include stuff like making a virtual machine, doing a GPU pass-through, faking that you are playing on Windows, and probably many more things that advanced players know. Not players, but users know, and know how to do them and how to try and play those games. And for, let's say, beginning user, someone that only wants to play games, this isn't going to work. Granted, well, like most of people say, Linux is pretty advanced, but if you want to have more player base, more user base, this thing won't cut. Basically, they won't spend like, well, maybe in your case it's 30 minutes and you're done and you can play basically on Linux. Well, not on Linux, but on VM with Windows at this point. But for those people, they are just going to boot up Windows and play this game in 5 minutes. It's basically not worth for them. I've seen probably a few posts about making it harder to play on Linux now and having more workarounds that they did have on Windows back when they played. It's kinda saddening that stuff like this is happening. And it's also worth mentioning that we should get this support for Linux if we want to have basically other system to use. I know this rant is kinda messed up, but yeah, these are the things I noticed and needs to be addressed. I will also like to address a few things for the future that would really benefit a lot of people and me as well. Because when switching to Linux, you really need to make some important choices, changes and workarounds in order to have a similar experience as you had when it comes to the advanced level. These aren't necessary things if you are using your computer for gaming or spending time watching movies or chatting on Discord or other portals. But it's worth knowing because it may turn out that something important to you may not be available on Linux. While it's not necessary to switch to AMD since you can work on both Intel and Nvidia hardware, it is more convenient to use only AMD stuff. Microsoft products won't work, at least most of them, as an Office suite. But there are other word processors and other programs that replicate workflow, such as WPS Office, OnlyOffice, FreeOffice or LibreOffice. We can find on the internet attempts to install the package Wine, or even more ambitious people copy the Office package already installed on a Windows Virtual Machine or Windows Drive and try it that way. The result is still the same, that it doesn't work. Adobe package will not work and won't be supported, although there is an online version of Photoshop or versions of Adobe CC from years 2021 or 2022, maybe even 2023, I'm not sure. These work and can be used with some scripts, but we will never really have full satisfaction with them compared to the originals. If you're a graphic designer, you usually use things like Corel or Adobe, and those things don't exist on Linux. Of course, GIMP and Inkscape would work too, but let's say it's not the same, unfortunately, and you won't probably use those two programs to your work. An alternative to that is Affinity Photo. You have to mess around with that too, but it's more likely to work than Office. Myself, I tried for this video to make it work, but using install script I couldn't make it work, so I gave up on it and decided to only speak about it. But you can still see people are still installing and managing to make it work on Linux. DaVinci Resolve seemingly works, but you have to agonize over it. Now you see the solution to this problem I had and I reached on Ubuntu. The installer first notifies you of old or missing libraries. In this case, we have to extract the installer, deleting the required libraries that are in the requirements text file before installing them from terminal, and before we install we add skip package check before running the set installer. Finally, we managed to install Resolve, but something does not launch again. The next solution is to use a script to fix this problem, and we finally can run the program, but there are more and more problems. On Ubuntu, we get a message, at least in my AMD GPU case, that the GPU is not supported. Fucking awesome, it's not supported, but I'm still using it on Windows, editing and rendering those videos. How the fuck you can't even open it? On other distributions the program will run, but it may be that you can't edit anything. This is a known problem because the program only supports NVIDIA encodings and it didn't even want to edit the stuff I recorded via AV1. You not only have to convert the file FFmpeg with only video or video and audio or only audio, but also you have to fix the bug with the GPU. For this purpose, on Fedora and Nombara, I installed ROCm libraries and also the necessary things under the AMD GPU. And one thing that is important is you must first switch the session to X11 because for some reason you cannot do it on Wayland. Only after that we can both on one and the other session edit videos. In Ubuntu it is fortunately more detailed. In that case I had to use the repository for Ubuntu 22.04 Jammy to get the AMD drivers, and I was finally able to use Resolve at all. Well, how about the performance? If you are valuing queue time, then maybe in an hour or more some videos can be rendered. In my case, the render times, from the fact that I use AV1 and ultra-wide resolution, often come out twice as long. So in another way, I didn't want to ruin my desktop experience because of Wayland on NVIDIA, and yet it was ruined anyway by not being able to edit videos on Linux because of my AMD card. While I consider Linux to be a really good platform with most of the tools probably ready, some companies are not willing to support it fully or not at all because of how complicated their programs are. They have either licensing issues or just it's too much of a hassle to put together a team to support Linux and deal with problems that users have. And this is my biggest problem that is holding back the growth of the system popularity. And for now we are stuck in a stage where companies choose to offer support over the condition of high popularity. I am not surprised, unfortunately. After all, it's a big risk and big money. Another thing that annoys me is Discord, and here I will only mention two things: screen share and performance. You cannot screen share in the official app where they broke the X-Wayland bridge, and I swear, and I said it in that video on other channel, that I could screen share normally on Discord. Myself, earlier I was using this Discord and I was able to screen share with friends and show them what was on the screen. Nowadays I cannot. The solution to this is Vencourt, more specifically their desktop app, which is basically a web page but as well Discord application, where in addition to plugins we have also ability to share the screen. The second problem, namely performance, applies only to NVIDIA cards, of course on Wayland. On AMD I wasn't able to see that issue in more detail, but on NVIDIA the problem is performance, which simply sucks because we use the card from the green and Wayland. Basically you get clipping, lags, stutters. These are things that you may encounter when using Discord. It is also worth mentioning another important thing, namely one standard to be standard of all. Basically every distro has at least one standard of its own. This isn't a flaw in itself, in the end the community does what it wants, but I beg you, if a standard works, then don't replace it with your crappy standard. I'm looking at you, Ubuntu. In general, the Snap Store and Snap in general is a mistake. Ubuntu used apt for years and finally they found it too slow, so they made a Frankenstein monster when instead of fixing the problem they are creating two more, and they didn't improve the speed. And on top of that, their Snap Store contains outdated version of programs like OBS, Discord and Screen Copy. The last one has a version from before they added to this application the ability to capture audio from the phone. It's simply already better to use Flatpaks in this case. The cruel truth is that despite having that 4% share on home computers and devices, there are still problems that plague Linux. While Linux for server work is great, for someone who plays only on Linux at home is good, does coding or just browses the internet while chatting, then switching might not be a problem. Aside from the fact that when they encounter an unplayable title, they may just not play it because they don't care. They are pretty safe and can switch. But if your needs are specific, such as mine, where video editing and graphic design is important to me because I use certain tools, it's quite unprofitable. Unfortunately, people don't care about what they are using and wouldn't even switch if they didn't get some kind of shock. Windows 10 will already lose support in just a year. And since the introduction of the new version, people will have been inundated with ads to switch to the new version. Meanwhile, Windows 11 will probably be stuffed with more and more AI, something that is so useless because most of the stuff is just an applet for a website and not something built in. Knowing Microsoft's history of trying to implement something only for a few percent of people to use and then abandon it, as they did literally this year with Windows Subsystem for Android, me and probably others wouldn't want another useless thing that will be removed in a few years. Another major is the Recall app that no one asks for to be built into your system and record the monitor. At least for now, the best way for Microsoft to keep its nose out of our data is to remove manually the stuff that they are doing and debloat the system. If you know what you're doing, of course. I would like also to finally point out that a computer is a tool that we use every day as work, a useful tool that helps in learning, entertainment, a chance to see loved ones, friends, or simply a device that we spend a lot of time with. Users should be guided by what they want to do and use the computer how they want, instead of agreeing to collect data and slice their workspace with ads. Alright, I tried to make this video as objective as possible. It's hard to me to say anything more about the positives in games because you can see everything on your screens. So yeah, that's it. These are the positives and negatives of Linux. In the next video on this topic, I probably will discuss the issues of Windows and how to cut yourself off from being Microsoft's data machine. I hope you like this video, take care, and until the next video, see you!